Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Capitol Riverfront Bids 2021 annual meeting, luncheon, and State of the Capitol Riverfront. And while we can't gather in person, we did want to celebrate the past year through a virtual format like we did last year. My name's Michael Stevens, and I'm the president of the Capitol Riverfront Bid, and I'm so pleased you're able to join us for this virtual annual meeting where we're going to go over the highlights of the year and hear from a number of people. We do this every year as a general membership meeting to elect our next class of board of directors, but to provide you, our community, our residents, our visitors, our employees, stakeholders, property owners, an update on the activities of our organization over the past year. So today, after my welcome and overview, we're going to hear from our board chair, Scott Mosley. There will be an interview with me and on hospitality tourism recovery with Elliott Ferguson of Destination DC. Be followed by remarks by Councilmember Allen, and then we'll go into our Clean Team Awards, our Foundation Awards, and then Ted Jutras on our team will give a state of the Capitol Riverfront neighborhood, and I'll wrap up the day with some closing remarks. I think the quote at the bottom of the deck here is appropriate. We don't get a do-over or a mulligan for the past year, but we can start from now and create a brand new ending. And I think that's what we've tried to do every day, is start anew, create something new, do something better, string together a series of small successes that make the year seem consequential and effective. Our annual meeting serves as an opportunity for us to also present to you our 2021 annual report. And I want to give a big shout out to Ted Jutras on our team and E. Shao, who they head up our planning and development section. They really shepherded our annual report again this year. I think it's a very nice piece of storytelling of what transpired over the year. The entire team participated, but the focus was on community growth and connection and how those things persevered throughout the year and were really our guiding stars as to what we needed to do throughout the year as we again battled the pandemic, but were able to open up a wee bit and see some sense of return to normalcy. But you can see the front page and one of the infographic pages there. I think it's a really nice compendium and summary of this past year of 2021. And no annual meeting would be complete without our front page headlines, where I'm going to run you through 6 of them, things that were significant to us throughout this year. In-person events did return, and they were well attended, from our Friday night concerts to ice skating now is occurring in Canal Park, to jazz in Canal Park, to neighborhood walking tours and meetup series. It was really nice to see the public back out and coming to our events in the parks and throughout the neighborhood. We saw new murals unveiled in Buzzard Point as public art. They're a part of the Pepco screening wall for their utility plant down there. And 2 of them were installed, and there really are beautiful public art additions to Buzzard Point, which is a rapidly growing residential mixed-use, high-density neighborhood sub-area of Capitol Riverfront. We saw the second edition of 12 Days of Cap Riv, our holiday celebration that Bonnie Trine, our Vice President of Operations, and her team present. It did return. We had wonderful events and great attendance by the neighborhood. And we also saw the return of Enchant to Nationals Park. No story here or surprise. The residential development surge did continue. We saw 668 residential units deliver, but the bigger story is 8 residential buildings are currently under construction. That's almost 1,900 units that will be delivering next year and the year beyond. Another significant milestone for us was we incorporated the Clean Team as members of our bid itself. So they're now part of our organizational family. We're glad to have them incorporated into our family. These men and women perform yeoman's duty, do wonderful work, and Susan Hampton on our team will be speaking to that later. And I think finally, we saw the delivery of the new Frederick Douglass Bridge. What a beautiful architectural statement and symbolic statement linking 2 sides of the city together over the Anacostia River. This was a wonderful project shepherded by DDOT, and it just changed the skyline by the river and provided these unique river crossings and a 3.2 bridge system to bridge system loop that you can do on either side of the river. So congratulations to the city and DDOT for delivering this new Frederick Douglass Bridge, and it's such a powerful statement. I like this quote: "There is no power for change greater than a community discovering what it cares about." And I think our community really rose to the occasion this year and did discover what it cares about. And a lot of those things are evident in community and growth and connection. And community defines a lot of different aspects of our neighborhood. It's the residents who live here, the employees who work here, not at full strength yet, but there are people coming back to the office, the visitors who came to baseball games and soccer games and our Friday night concerts, et cetera. So I think our community did persevere through its support of the parks, its support of the restaurants and retailers at a hyper-local level, and support of events that did generate funds for the local charities in our community. Our growth continued. The growth cycle continued with the addition of 7 new buildings and a return to normal residential occupancy rates that were back to almost pre-pandemic levels. And our residential community has grown to almost 17,000 members. That's an incredible number. We're hopefully on our way, over 50% on our way to almost 34,000 residents at build out. And then our neighborhood has remained connected through a variety of platforms, from our newsletter to attending in-person events, going to sporting events at Nats Park and Audi Field, coming to Friday night concerts or jazz and canal, or just getting out on the Riverwalk Trail and being by the river and seeing your neighbors at the grocery store or out in the parks and open spaces. So it's a wonderful thing to be back in those situations where we can connect in person, but also through a variety of events. And next, I'd like to introduce our board chair, Scott Mosley. There we go. Scott is our new board chair for the next 2 years. He has followed Adam Gooch of Akridge. Scott is the vice president of Stewart Investments. They will be entering into the development arena in the big way with the redevelopment of their concrete plant down on the Anacostia River. Scott, I want to thank you personally for assuming the title of board chair for the next 2 years. My team and I are looking forward to working with you and your stewardship of the board. So thank you, and I'm going to turn it over to you, my friend.
Great. Well, thanks for that introduction, Michael. And good afternoon, everyone, and Happy New Year. I want to thank you for attending the Capitol Riverfront Bids virtual annual membership meeting today and for a look at back at the past year. My name is Scott Mosley. I'm with the Stewart Investment Company, and I am the incoming chair of the Capitol Riverfront Bid Board of Directors. While we're unable to meet in person to review this past year, I am glad we're able to do this virtually and take a look back at the past year as well as a look forward. Once again, we've experienced a year that was full of surprises, adjustments, some might argue a slight return to normalcy, but also a year with new variants, along with varying degrees of hope. As we all know, even with the vaccines, 2021 was full of uncertainty and challenges, yet it did offer a glimpse into living life with the pandemic. We all still had to be flexible and willing to adapt, change, and reevaluate as circumstances dictated. But amidst all that, there were bright spots that illustrated the resolve and determination of our elected officials, citizen leaders, businesses, restaurants, and the associations that represent our core economies. As our annual report conveys, it was an important time for community, growth, and connection in our Capitol Riverfront neighborhood. Indeed, our residential community grew to approximately 17,000 residents, who choose to live in a riverfront neighborhood defined by its connection to our parks, the Anacostia River, and our overall outdoor ethos. Our neighborhood experienced new growth as more residential buildings delivered, more restaurants and retail opened to serve the community, and new office and hotel spaces were developed and planned. And the neighborhood remained connected through things like our newsletter, events in the park, the 12 days of Cap Riv, and numerous opportunities to support and engage with our restaurants and retailers. This annual meeting of the Capitol Riverfront Bids membership offers us the opportunity to reflect on the past year and recognize those people, activities, and efforts that made it a memorable year. Part of that look back is the release of our 2021 annual report, which I hope you'll view on the Bids website. But this forum is also an opportunity to thank those individuals and groups that persevered and continued to make Capitol Riverfront a great neighborhood in which to live, work, and play. Now, some of those whom we celebrate today include the following. And first and foremost, we want to thank and recognize the BID's clean team members who continue to provide their essential services in the public realm 7 days a week throughout the pandemic. As part of this, we want to thank Jerry Carcamo, the clean team operations manager. And as Michael noted, this year we brought the clean team members in-house and they are now full-time employees of the BID. We also want to recognize our partners at the DC government who provided funding for several public realm improvements in the parks in the neighborhood. We want to recognize the developers and builders who proceeded with the construction of numerous residential projects and office buildings that also include retail space. I want to thank the BID's overall board of directors, which includes 21 voting members and 4 at-large non-voting members who provided oversight and guidance throughout this past year, as well as the board's 5-member executive committee comprised of our officers and past board chair. And I and the rest of the board and the BID certainly want to thank past board chair Adam Gooch of Akridge, who served for the past 2 years in the role I'm assuming. Adam, thank you for your leadership, great judgment, and vision over your term as board chair. I've learned a lot from you about the organization and how the board can effectively support this bid team. So thank you very much for your service, Adam. And finally, I want to thank the bid's 8-person professional staff who work tirelessly week in and week out on all the initiatives and work programs over the course of the year. In addition to each of their own dynamic skill sets, these folks do a remarkable job of bringing owners, public officials, citizens, and other stakeholders together to foster community, to help grow our neighborhood, and to enhance that special connectivity between people and all that the Capitol Riverfront has to offer. In no particular order, I'd like to recognize each of these staff members by name. So this includes Susan Hampton, Public Realm Director, Tony Boyd, our Parks Director, Bonnie Trine, Vice President of Operations and Chief of Staff, Ted Jutras, Vice President of Planning and Development, E. Shao, Planning Analyst, Grace Acella, our Parks Event and Marketing Manager, Claudia Urbana, Social Media Coordinator, and of course, Michael Stevens, the President of the Capitol Riverfront Bid. Thanks to each of you for your hard work and steadfastness over this past year. And I and the rest of the board look forward to working with you this year. So once again, all the aforementioned groups and individuals served as a foundation for constancy in our neighborhood and responded daily to the challenges and opportunities that kept occurring. With today's annual meeting serving as an example, we've all learned how to adapt and build community, facilitate new growth, and maintain connections to each other, all while pursuing excellence in service delivery and accomplishment in work programs. I thank all of you for your ongoing commitment to the Capitol Riverfront neighborhood and the ongoing operations of our bid. And I thank you for attending today's annual meeting. All the best for a happier, healthier, and I sure hope a more normal 2022. So with that, please enjoy the upcoming conversation between BID President Michael Stevens and Destination DC President and CEO Elliott Ferguson about the state of hospitality and recovery in the Capitol Riverfront. This will be followed by remarks from Ward 6 Council Member Charles Allen. So thanks again, everybody, and enjoy the rest of the program. Thank you.
Welcome to the Capitol Riverfront Bids annual meeting here, January 20th of 2022. I'm joined by Elliott Ferguson, who's President and CEO of Destination DC. Elliott was part of our conversation last year when we were talking about recovery from COVID in a variety of industry segments, and we thought it was appropriate to follow up that panel with a more detailed discussion on hospitality tourism as an industry leader, industry sector, and how waterfront communities in this region are leading the resurgence in tourism in this region because of their presence on the waterfront. So Elliott, thank you so much for joining us. I know you're very busy. I appreciate your time. And I just want to give a shout out real quickly to the Union Square Hospitality Group, who's hosting us here on the top of the Thompson Hotel at Anchovy Social. It's a beautiful view of the Anacostia River behind us, so it's highly appropriate that we're here in this setting overlooking the river itself, which is one of the major features of the Capitol Riverfront neighborhood. But Elliott, you've been in the business quite some time. You've been here we go again moment of we're in another year of the COVID-19 pandemic. You've struggled through 2 years now, but I'd love for you to give our listeners and viewers an assessment of where we are in the recovery of the hospitality tourism industry at this particular moment in time, kind of pre-Omicron, it seemed to be coming back, and now post-Omicron.
Absolutely. First of all, it's a pleasure to be back. And the difference between this time and the last time is that we remain optimistic as we're dealing with the virus and moving forward with the industry. You know, I moved to DC 20 years ago, right after 9/11. So when you think about that span of time, we've had 9/11, anthrax, sniper, 6 government shutdowns, January 6th, and of course, Omicron. And I think that this is the most polarizing from a global perspective. And it's also affected, of course, business in Washington, D.C., as tourism remains extremely important to our economy. So, you know, the difference is now, Michael, is that we're focusing on recovery, and like several people are, but the difference as I have this conversation, especially with news outlets internationally, is that we hear so often the negative numbers, which we need to know the number of cases. We need to know how this is affecting our ability to get back on track. But now the conversation needs to be more around how can you still have a meeting in person in an environment such as what we are in now, because we'll be in this space, hopefully not in the same vein as where we are today, but this will exist for a long time to come. So we remain optimistic as we're looking at recovery, especially the number of groups that have confirmed that they're coming to Washington next year, and of course, the reopening of the international borders on November the 8th. So there's positive news for us as we're looking at 2022 and beyond.
I had read your most recent newsletter that you had just hosted 2 in-person conventions at the Walter Washington Convention Center. I assume that went well. Are there other issues confronting you besides the pandemic itself, but with labor shortages at our hotels or at the convention center itself? There's a labor or an employment shortage across the country that seems to be stifling some sectors. Is that the case here in Washington, D.C.?
Yes, sadly, especially within the restaurant community, that is a problem. I think as we look at our convention market, because there have been so few meetings, has not necessarily been a big issue. Everything that has been coming to DC, especially last year, for the most part, was transient, domestic transient. So we were fortunate to have the conventions in which we had last year, and as you just referenced, Modern Language Association, Transportation Research Board just finished their meetings, and overall they went extremely well. So I think the key things as we're looking at these groups coming in is, they need to know how to navigate through the changing dynamics of the narrative in terms of coming into Washington, D.C. What happens January 15th with the vaccine mandate? Who's on first? What are the expectations? The building has done a really good job, and fortunately, we've not seen any labor issues as it pertains to recovery. As a destination, the cities like Boston, New York, Washington, D.C., we're on the slower end of recovery. Cities like Miami, those beachfront properties, even though we have great rivers here in the city, they've done very well. And they've seen higher occupancy and average daily room rate. So we're anticipating strength in numbers as we move forward. And right now, the hotels are really hurting. We've seen some concerns in terms of grocers, but that does not necessarily affect visitors to the city.
I'm glad you mentioned that you'd been here 20 years. I've been here 21, and I'm glad that you replayed all those negative hits, so to speak, that really hit our city hard in a number of ways. And I think it speaks to the resiliency of Washington, D.C. to be able to recover from those sort of body blows that keep happening and happening and happening. What do you think are the foundational aspects of our hospitality tourism industry that keep us so resilient?
Absolutely. Clearly, it's the federal government and the access to the federal government by the 2,000 plus nonprofits and associations that have chosen the DMV for their own backyard. So most groups will come to Washington, D.C. with their annual convention or a smaller meeting to interface on Capitol Hill. So that's a huge component. So as we look at business travel, extremely important to us. The convention market, we have an amazing convention center that's nearly 20 years old but looks brand new. So we have the infrastructure to host these larger congresses. And when you think about the recipe of all the things in which we have as a destination, as well as infrastructure and access to key assets, speakers, Congress, et cetera, that's why DC continues to bounce back. Regionally, we do extremely well simply because groups an attendee can jump on a train in New York, 6 a.m., be in Washington, D.C., spend the day at a convention, and then head back home. So these things are extremely important to us. Notwithstanding some of the things that have affected business. And these are the reasons why we continue to remain a strong destination, especially in the meetings market.
I believe it. And having 3 airports that have international flights is a great thing as well. I'm going to go back in time a wee bit to when Mayor Williams was our mayor of our city for 2 terms. And he said, one way we're going to make Washington, D.C. a world-class city is to embrace our waterfronts and our riverfronts and make them of paramount importance and engage them and provide accessibility to them. You mentioned Miami is a great destination city, wonderful weather, of course, but also access to the oceans and the Gulf. So tell me about how that plays into the image of Washington, D.C. now that we are fully embracing our waterfront neighborhoods, or our neighborhoods are embracing the waterfronts or the riverfronts. What does that mean for you as an organization marketing the city as a world-class capital, world capital, and a destination that we have? Georgetown with its waterfront has been here quite some time. Beautiful park there, other support infrastructure. The Southwest waterfront with the wharf has become known as a destination and an incredible one, a very urban engagement. And us as Capitol Riverfront on the Anacostia River, which now people are rediscovering in droves. And we have restaurants and a more pastoral engagement, if you will. But what does that mean for your organization and your ability to market the city as a destination, to have that riverfront as part of the sell?
Very good question. I think the key thing that most folks that live in the DMV, what we know about our city, we have a lot of pride in how amazing Washington is. But as we talk about this in a local perspective, what I try to get the local community to understand is that we have an image problem globally. It's tied to, as much as museums are an amazing reason to come to Washington, D.C., it does not necessarily resonate as a fun city to everyone. Globally, folks have seen Washington, D.C. in the news probably all their lives. It's always tied to politics. Every TV show, every movie is tied to politics or the world coming to an end. That's a part of what we have to dissect as we're promoting D.C. as a destination. So therefore, riverfronts, nightlife, theater, sporting events, the food scene, walkability, the list goes on, is what we try to engage individuals to understand how diverse D.C. is as a destination. 20 years ago, Southwest waterfront, Southeast waterfront, yeah, it was what it was. Georgetown existed, and it was the waterfront where people went. Now, when I talk about our destination, specifically where we are now, I basically say that yes, theoretically this land existed before, but this neighborhood did not exist. So individuals are coming and enjoying outdoor activities on the river or near the river and experiencing other parts of Washington that we're able to sell for the first time. Because neighborhoods in Washington, architecture, the international appeal of our destination, we all know that exists. Folks coming to the city, being able to go to a football game, a baseball game here in Southeast, or a soccer game across the South Capitol Street, that's a big deal for these areas, and it gives us something else to promote. The aha moment for people and how we came up with our slogan was that the reaction is, we had no idea DC was so cool. And that was the impetus for DC Cool, and continues on as we promote the areas and the things about Washington that people don't know, but they want to discover as they're looking at coming to our city.
How does something like the Anacostia River, which has gone through a remarkable cleanup, a huge perceptual change, and I always tell people it connects to 1,600 acres of parklands, including the National Arboretum, that is our equivalence to Rock Creek Park. How do you take that internationally and tell that story as a way to induce people to come on international travel to Washington, D.C.?
Well, all that you just said is a part of it, plus the infrastructure. You all have a very cool mix of hotels that have opened in the area. Thompson is one of them, whereas you have an extremely upscale experience or a mid-level experience or limited service property. You've got it all here. You're in an area where people physically live. And there's something to be said about an individual traveling and going to a restaurant and always feeling at least like there's a 16-hour or 18-hour feel to the destination because people live here. And the Anacostia River is really the icing on the cake. People don't know that we have two rivers. They don't know that we have one, especially depending on where you are. So, just physically watching or looking at water is an appealing thing to humans as a race. I mean, as people,
species,
as a species. Thank you. And that ties into the fact that people want to come back to their hotel or walk along the river. It's a calming experience. And to your point, it's clean, it's accessible, and they're trying to find ways to enjoy it. And I know that continues to expand, be it kayaking or doing a boat ride on the river, or doing a conservation tour and learning more about this particular part of Washington as a whole. So these are things in which we use and things that are of interest to folks that as they're looking at traveling. They want to come here, get out of the primary area of the city and have a more calm, relaxing experience, and that's what you offer here.
I'm also glad you mentioned neighborhoods and a local residential population and people like urban walkable neighborhoods. What a great thing to do, to be able to go to New York and experience 30 different neighborhoods in one major city. Other cities are like that. So I think our residential population here, which is almost 17,000 people, is a distinct advantage, and that we sit on the Green Line, and once you arrive here by cab or Uber or Green Line or whatever, you can walk to almost everything in our 500-acre neighborhood. How does that play into your thinking as well?
Exactly just like that. For a convention that's happening at the Walter E. Washington Convention Center, individuals, especially international visitors that are very much so inclined to get on Metro or do a bike ride to the convention center, they can do that even without, very easily from the Southeast waterfront, Capitol waterfront. So these are things in which we're exposing those individuals, especially those that have come to DC more than one time.
Yes.
Like, I always stay at this property, and I'm like, that's great. However, You might want to look at other areas and then bring your family, go to a baseball game, go to a concert that's perhaps happening at Nats Park, or enjoy other aspects of the city in addition to the reasons, the business aspect of your visit here. If I'm in New York City, I talk about the number of museums that we have in the city and the number that are free. And I ask, how many Smithsonians do people think are in Washington? And even in New York City, folks will say 2 or 3, not 16. They don't think the zoo is a part of it. But they don't see the accessibility by staying here, getting on Metro, and going to those other parts of Washington, D.C. That's what we focus on as we're looking at those that are coming for conventions, those that are coming for business travel, that traditionally stay in a section of the city. We want to expose them to how accessible this is to the Hill, how accessible it is to Reagan National Airport, and how it is self-sustaining with amazing restaurants, retail, and awesome things to do just in this particular area of Washington.
We really believe the Metro is one of the great reasons the neighborhood succeeds as it does, because of the connectivity on the Green Line. And what we have found is we've had hyper-local support of our local restaurants by our residents. And we had 3 more restaurants open than closed during COVID, which was such an advantage for us that our neighbors went out and used those on a daily basis, either through takeout or dining in, or sitting outside and dining. So what a great compliment to our residential population here. Go back to Mayor Williams a bit and Andy Altman, who is our great director of planning. They set this vision through the Anacostia Waterfront Initiative Framework Plan. The river was an asset. It should be valued as such, and we should make improvements. And there's been, through 2 bridge systems, the beautiful new Frederick Douglass Bridge, 16-mile bike trail, the cleanup of the river, billions of dollars have been invested in this river corridor. What else can the city do to make this river as an ecosystem, but also as a recreational system, more attractive? What sort of investments, in your mind's eye, could the district government do in partnership with private sector to engage the riverfront more and make it more accessible and more usable, 9 months out of the year?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really tied to the Office of Economic Development within the city. To your point, Mayor Williams, when I moved here, he was mayor. He did incredible things for the city, even as a CFO. And those things continue to resonate. Washington is one of those cities where, yes, people need to come here for work, but they don't have to live here. And when I moved here 20 years ago, folks love living in the city. If they were single, the moment they got married and had a kid, they felt like they had to leave. Those dynamics have changed significantly, and that has to continue to happen. The retail in Washington when I moved here was marginal. It's gotten much better. As we look at continuous development, in addition to people physically living here, we need more retail. We need the diversity of retail. We need it to be local. The big boxes and the national chains, yeah, you need those as well. But individuals that come to a city like Washington, we want them to diversify. We want to change their mode of thinking to look at areas like the riverfront as a place that they can come and go for a walk or a run, but also have an amazing meal, great shopping. And as we look at the cleanup of the river and more people physically moving in areas along the river which did not exist before, that has to continue. But there has to be a combination of resources and the infrastructure tied to, again, retail, restaurants, to tie that into those individuals that choose to move here, as well as those that choose to visit this area.
We've been watching, and I've been following, the Smith Group did a study about swimming in the Anacostia River and identified probably 15 spots from up by the Arboretum all the way down to the Washington Channel where that could occur. And I think it's a brilliant idea, and there'll be some sort of celebration next year with a jump in to celebrate the water quality has improved so much we can now swim in the Anacostia. How do you think that plays into hospitality tourism appeal, that you can now come down here? Paris is discussing riverfront swimming in the Seine. And so what does it mean to us as a community, as a city, if we have that access to the river and the Potomac and even the Anacostia?
Yeah, it's just an additional selling point from a leisure perspective. I mean, individuals, there is a lot of research tied to what I do. It's not just, hey, let's just, who's flying directly to Washington, D.C. We study the habits, the economic habits of different parts of the world, as we have offices of representation in 5 different countries. So as we're looking at that, we know that individuals like going to beach proper destinations because they're beach destinations. However, above and beyond that, in some cases, those beach destinations can be somewhat limiting. So by offering that experience in a city like Washington, whereas the stay here is much more diverse. You know, I love superlatives when we're called the fittest city, the best city for theater. All these things are, we utilize those superlatives in terms of giving individuals a sense of how cool DC is, Michelin Guide. So just imagine telling someone that they can come to Washington, DC, do all these great things, and then relax in a beachfront or riverfront environment in Washington, DC. That would really resonate positively with visitors to the city.
I think it would as well as I hope there'll be additional investment in infrastructure for boating facilities, whether it's canoes, kayaks, power boats, sailboats, or whatever, just to increase the ability to get on the river, be engaged with it, et cetera. You are an eternal optimist, and as I try to be, and as someone who's marketing the city, you almost have to be. But I'm going to ask you to put on another kind of hat and look at the city, and what are the top 3 challenges you see to the hospital? And let's just take COVID off the table.
Sure.
What are the top 3 challenges, and how do you leverage those into opportunities when you're looking at citywide marketing for hospitality tourism?
Yeah, it's really tied to the hospitality industry is really, you know, we've had a black eye, if you will, especially with COVID, because the industry has been challenged, and individuals are now questioning whether or not they should return to hospitality. So it's going to be harder for us to attract that top talent into the hospitality industry because, again, service is a huge part of what people want to and expect in a first-class destination like Washington. That's huge. So it existed before. You know, I tell people I've been in the industry for 34 years. If you ask members of my family, what do? They'll say something with tourism. They don't get it. So even as we're looking at developing opportunities and going into the high schools, which our organization does through our foundation, to get them interested in this industry as a career field, you know, professionally as they're going to college and what have you, it's tough. So we're going to have to really focus on ways in which we can attract talent that sees opportunities and understands the financial rewards tied to this industry as a whole. Cost of doing business in Washington, D.C., we're not the cheapest city. We shouldn't be the cheapest city. We're a first-tier destination. But now that second-tier destinations, the Indianapolis, the Denvers, San Antonios, they have invested heavily. They are now formidable. You know, we compete against them on a regular basis. So we've got to find ways to remain attractive and get those groups to choose Washington, D.C., especially now when they've all been financially impacted, and that's something we have to deal with. The last thing has been infrastructure for a long time. The number of hotels within close proximity to the convention center and the amount of meeting space in hotels. So that has improved as we've seen a lot of rooms being added to Washington, D.C., which makes us even more walkable for groups that opt not to do shuttle to the convention center. So those things, in that particular arena, we've seen improvements, but that's still something in which we continue to focus on.
Would you like to see more investment by the private sector in hotel facilities along the waterfront? Is that another piece of the selling point, is you have a destination hotel right on the river, either in Georgetown, Southwest, or here? Does that make your job easier at all?
Additional inventory is always a good thing for us. If you were talking to a hotelier, they would say absolutely not, because they don't want the competition.
Right.
But we also recognize the fact that as I try to explain to individuals, someone staying in Washington on business versus staying in Virginia or Maryland, they're going to eat 3 meals at least, especially if they're on business travel. They're going to walk into a retail store because it's convenient to them. The spend and economic impact of that traveler is much greater. So if we have that additional inventory, we can go after different types of groups. So, you know, the spring in Washington, D.C., starting with the Cherry Blossom Festival, is the beginning of our season. So that also means room rates are higher. So there will be more people looking to come to Washington, but perhaps choose to stay outside of Washington because of rates. So as we have that additional inventory, we have an opportunity to really attract those individuals to stay in Washington and realize the economic impact of those visitors.
I'm glad you mentioned Cherry Blossom because we will be hosting Pedalpalooza here
Yep.
in the Capitol Riverfront in the spring to kick off Cherry Blossom. And we're very excited to have up to 30,000 people come to our neighborhood, perhaps for the first time,
Yes.
to see the infrastructure of the river and the Riverwalk Trail, the boardwalk, the parks, et cetera. You've got the ear right now on our time here of some of my major stakeholders. I'd love for you to suggest to them what we can do as the Capitol Riverfront neighborhood to enhance our hospitality tourism appeal, infrastructure. What should we be doing to make this one of the go-to neighborhoods when international or domestic travelers are considering coming to Washington?
Yeah, I think the key thing, especially for those that are looking at investing or have invested, is you got to go after retail. You definitely need to, yes, it's great that we are physically seeing people moving in this neighborhood, which again did not exist 15 years ago. That's a plus. The additional hotel inventory is huge. It allows us to bring individuals that are visiting the city into this area, especially the appeal for the international market with the metro station. Retail is huge. Additional, it's great to have the apartments. We want to see more condos. We want to see people that are basically making a long-term investment to live in this community versus it being more transient as apartment dwellers tend to be. So those are the key things. I think everything else, you're kind of doing it right now. The benefit of this neighborhood, there's not a lot of land that you can really develop in Washington, but this was one of those areas whereas, went from 0 to 90 in a few months. And that momentum needs to continue, even though we know that there are concerns about certain markets, the rental market, the office market. I love office space, but the problem that we have in certain parts of Washington is at 5 o'clock they become dead zones if nobody physically lives there. So you need to make sure you continue to focus on that diversity of the stay or offers that you have here. A theater in this area would be a huge draw. Movie theater and performance-based theater would be great. I know we have a lot of them in the city, but that would draw individuals that are perhaps living out in the suburbs that want to opt for a staycation to choose this area versus another area of Washington.
Yeah, I was glad you chose the location of the Capitol Turnaround for your annual State of the Tourism Market here in Washington, D.C. It's a beautiful theater facility, 982 seats. We had an event there over Christmas. I'll finish up with, is that a really good piece of infrastructure coupled with DC United, Audi Field, Nationals Park? Do those all play into the lexicon of meeting spaces for larger conventions that are looking for unique places to have a large meeting gathering?
They absolutely do. I think a key part of what we focus on, destination management organizations, or DMOs as we're known, is we've always sold rates, space, infrastructure, and how sexy our destinations are. Planners are now wanting more, especially those that are coming on a regular basis. So for us to be able to say to them that they can do their opening event at Nats Park, or they can do a board meeting there, or one of the tops of some of these amazing hotels and apartment buildings, it helps to diversify their stay in Washington. So just imagine, instead of being in a convention center meeting space or a hotel, which are all great, you're being able to say to them, why don't you consider having your meeting at the rooftop where the bar is not open, but you have this great view of the river and this neighborhood. That is really appealing to customers. You reference Audi Field. We had our travel rally in Audi Field last year, whereas people tend to know that it's there, but from a global perspective, not as much. And that's what we want. We want to entice meeting planners to consider that space as well as a unique space to have an event or activity.
I'm glad the perspective is changing, and it's amazing the job that you and your organization have done to position Washington as a world-class city, a world-class destination, a capital, an international capital, and a place to come visit. Elliott Ferguson, I thank you for your time. We appreciate you joining us for our annual meeting this year as a follow-up to last year's panel. And again, congratulations on the work you do, and we appreciate the suggestions you made about how we can enhance our neighborhood at Capitol Riverfront as a better, popular tourism destination.
Michael,
so thank you, my friend.
Always my pleasure.
Great to spend the time with you.
I would say Washington.org, especially for the locals, because we pride ourselves on the fact that our website is something that locals use to figure out what they're going to do in Washington for date night or if they have visitors into the city. So it's always my pleasure. I love being here and appreciate our partnership.
Well, thank you again for joining us today. This was big fun.
My pleasure.
So hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Charles Allen. I'm the Ward 6 DC Council member. First off, thank you to Michael Stevens. I love that conversation you had with Elliott. That was wonderful. Let me also extend my thanks to Scott as you're taking on this new role as chair. Thank you for stepping up in that. And of course, a big thanks to Adam for his leadership in steering the bid so incredibly well, and to everybody. Really excited to join you today. I think first thing I've got to do, though, of course, I think we just got to address the elephant in the room. There have been some big changes in the neighborhood that take effect this year that I'm not excited about. So let's start with the bad news that I think is on everyone's mind. Max Scherzer is pitching for the Mets. I know. There's another big change coming this year. Maybe not as consequential as Max, but we've gone through a redistricting process, and that takes a lot of change. And there's actually a large part of the Capitol Riverfront neighborhood that is no longer in Ward 6, as now in Ward 8. Now, listen, I absolutely hate to lose any neighborhood out of Ward 6, but I do want to share this in context. Ward 6 in this year's redistricting had to lose 20,000 residents to other wards. To help again put that in context, that's the single largest shift of a population from one ward in the history of the District of Columbia. So it was big. But let me also say this, it doesn't change a thing. I still expect to be a full partner with the bid. I still have parts of the Capitol Riverfront that is in Ward 6. I know that Michael, I know that Scott, I know that Adam, I know that folks can pick up the phone and call me and talk about different issues, think about the challenges we have, and that's not going to change one bit. And so I want to assure you that I am committed to this community and this neighborhood. I'm committed to a good transition and partnership with the Ward 8 council member, but am really excited to continue working with you for so many great things. So let's jump into that, right? Like, what are some of the extensive good news things I think that we should be celebrating here? Capitol Riverfront now has 17,000 residents. Those residents have strongly supported our local businesses and restaurants. As I think I just heard Michael talking about, we saw 3 times more restaurants and retailers open versus closing. Those are great things. The Capitol Riverfront stakeholders and developers have achieved 71% build out of the neighborhood. At build out, there will be 37.5 million square feet of new development. Almost 27 million has been built over the past 23 years. It's an accomplishment. It's huge. Now, something I'm really excited about, and I was just there the other day, we have a new Frederick Douglass Bridge. It is a symbol that I think will be recognized around this entire country. It is a stunning bridge that links Ward 6 and Ward 8 over the Anacostia River. But more work remains to be done with the South Capitol Street corridor north of the Memorial Ellipse that'll be built. This section of the project has to be completed as it would complete a gateway to our city, to the US Capitol, as well as become more than just a seam between the Capitol Riverfront and the Southwest neighborhoods, but rather, it's as a dividing line, but rather think about how it is something that weaves together. This neighborhood is also, though, and I heard referenced many times, is made beautiful by the Anacostia River, which is an important asset, not just to the Capitol Riverfront and to our residents, but frankly, to the entire city. The river and its open spaces, they're not just great for the people who call this neighborhood home. They also help bring in new businesses. They help bring in new residents that continue to add to that vibrancy. I just reintroduced some legislation that would help create a new effort to help guide the district's policy on development and environmental policy along our waterways. As we've heard, we are remembering and rediscovering that we are a city on 2 rivers. It would also help ensure better interagency communication. So development and transportation, environmental protection decisions, they can all be made in concert. Whereas right now, it often feels like it's yin and yang and seesaw back and forth. Now, one of my favorite parts of this neighborhood, and frankly, any neighborhood, are the parks. They are such an important part of creating a high quality of life in a neighborhood and creating a sense of community. I have said before, Yards Park democratizes the river. I can go on any day and I will see my city reflected in Yards Park. That's why I've always worked to ensure consistent DC government funding. Now, the residents' advocacy effort on that behalf of parks funding is an important part of getting that done. In case you weren't keeping track of it, because I sure did, residents sent over 1,000 emails in this most recent budget process to help urge the council to restore the $1.2 million DPR grant funding that got cut. And we were able to work that out. But I know if I ever get 1,000 emails, residents care about it. And so it was great to see. Now, I'm fully supportive of our bid's 5-year renewal application this year. The bid has been an important management entity in the growth and development of the Capitol Riverfront. It's been a good steward of the parks, which have meant so much to our neighborhood. And then as we chart the course and we lead an equitable recovery from this pandemic, which just a year ago created a recession that forced the city to cut about $1 billion from the district, I know that I can count on the bid to help think about our economic recovery that prioritizes our residents, our workers, our local businesses, and so much more, that we will emerge a stronger DC, we will emerge a more equitable DC, and we will really realize the vision that I know we share for this great space. Finally, one of the most important parts of the bid is our clean team and what the men and women there do to keep the Capitol Riverfront's public realm such incredible space, such high quality, clean, helpful, friendly. They're superheroes. They probably need capes. And so with that, I'm excited to be able to give the screen over to our Public Realm Director, Susan Hampton, to help announce this year's Clean Team Awards. Susan, take it away.
Thank you, Councilmember Allen. It's so nice to join you all today. It's been my pleasure to lead the no longer contracted but newly in-house Clean Team in their efforts over the past year. The persistent day-to-day operations of the Clean Team, including landscaping, graffiti removal, grass cutting, snow shoveling, trash pickup, and event setup in the bid's 500 acres. It's gritty. It's not glamorous, but it is vital to the health and beauty of the Capitol Riverfront neighborhood. The Clean Team has remained vigilant, constant, hardworking presence in the neighborhood during the second year of the pandemic. 2021, much like 2020, found the men and women in blue performing a lot of important behind-the-scenes efforts, most of which go unnoticed, like curb sweeping, grass, leaf, snow removal, and trash can emptying, keeping the neighborhood clean in what our team does 365 days a year. Pandemic or not, the Clean Team is out there making the neighborhood a better place in which to live and do business. We appreciate all the Clean Team members' hard work, but today we want to give special recognition to 2 men who really stood out this year. First up is our outstanding performance honoree, Gary Williams. Gary is a certified go-getter. There's no job too hard or too gross. Gary sticks with the job and won't quit until it's done. No complaining or excuses. Gary shows up and grinds for hours to make projects happen. Gary's been with us for 9+ years. His persistence has led Gary to becoming one of the longest tenured members of the team. His many years of service has enabled the Capitol Riverfront bid to stay completely on top of Clean Team efforts, and we appreciate everything he does for the bid. And last but not least, Employee of the Year is DR Logan. Little D is one of the youngest members of our team. He is a hard worker and soft-spoken. He's more action than words. Jerry gets the job done and always has an uplifting attitude, no matter what the weather presents. It has been wonderful to observe Jerry's recent growth and positive demeanor throughout his work. Jerry's work ethic and growth are large contributing factors to why he is our Employee of the Year for 2021. Congrats to our 2 winners, and thanks again to the Clean Team. And now I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Bonnie Trine. She's VP of Operations, and she's going to do the presentation of the annual Foundation Awards.
Thanks so much, Susan, and a huge thanks again to each of our Clean Team members for your dedication throughout this past year. 7 years ago now, the bid created our annual Foundation Awards to honor the contributions made by both public and private stakeholders and partners to support the neighborhood's growth and success. This year's Foundation Awards celebrate both a stakeholder who's brought additional residential and hospitality to really enhance one of the neighborhood's major gateways, and to a community that has constantly supported neighborhood retailers and advocated for high quality open spaces right in their own backyards. This year's private foundation awardee is Greystar Real Estate Partners. Since breaking ground on their first residential development, 482 apartments, back in 2015, Greystar has continued to invest in the neighborhood, adding 70 Capitol yards and 100 Capitol yards to their portfolio within the past couple of years, and most recently delivering about 675,000 square feet of high-density mixed-use development on former CSX-owned land. This project features a 225-room AC hotel, as well as 2 residential buildings. And last but certainly not least, Greystar leveraged undeveloped land adjacent to this newest project to create a local dog park, which, as we all know, will serve as a valuable recreational asset for the neighborhood's resident and pup populations. A huge thanks again to Greystar for investing in Capitol Riverfront and completing an important gateway to the neighborhood along New Jersey Avenue Southeast. And although we must give this recognition virtually again this year, it's nonetheless very well deserved. Moving on to our Public Foundation Award this year. Very special Public Foundation Award belongs to the Capitol Riverfront community. The constant hyperlocal support shown by this community over the past 2 years has led to, as was emphasized a couple of times already, triple the amount of restaurant openings than closings in the neighborhood. What's more, over $47,000 have been generated for local charities through events and donations during the pandemic, and over 120 virtual and in-person events were supported and attended by neighborhood residents over the past 2 years. But the support did not end there, because when funding for 2 popular neighborhood parks were in jeopardy earlier in 2021, the local community stepped up to the plate and sent emails to the DC Council, which actually really helped restore funding in the district's budget for the parks. Thanks to you, the Capitol Riverfront bid can continue to provide high quality maintenance and operations in both neighborhood parks. And our bid team is so very appreciative to you for making your voice heard and shopping and dining local when it really counted. We dedicate this award to the residential community, and we look forward to advocating on behalf of the neighborhood with you in the future. This Public Foundation Award will live in the bid's new offices at the ground floor of the Garrett Apartments beginning midsummer of this year, 2022. And we really look forward to you visiting and viewing your award once we're all moved in. Now I'd like to introduce Ted Jutras, VP of Planning and Development here at the bid, to give the State of Capitol Riverfront.
Thank you, Bonnie. Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us. In 2021, the neighborhood took a big step forward towards making Capitol Riverfront a fully formed and well-rounded neighborhood. The neighborhood hit 71% build out this past year, with growth in each key industry, and with most of the remaining development slated to occur in Buzzard Point and phase 2 of the Yards and in DC Housing Authority's 4 remaining Capper-Carrollsburg development parcels. Our planning and development team tracks and analyzes all of this development in our quarterly development report, which we share with our neighborhood stakeholders. I'd like to thank Yi Xiao on our team for the diligent work that she does tracking down the data and pulling the report together. I also wanted to thank all of our property managers and developers who take the time to respond to our surveys. The 96% response rate that we enjoy is what allows us to provide accurate and timely data. It also shows that we have a neighborhood of team players. You can see here some of the takeaways from this year's reporting. The fact that the neighborhood was able to absorb more than 5,000 housing units over 2 years despite COVID speaks to the quality and desirability of the neighborhood that we're all working together to build. The residential growth we've experienced continues, albeit at a less blistering pace. Nearly 600 rental units and 74 condo units delivered last year. More than 1,800 units are currently under construction, and we anticipate that developers will break ground on more than 1,600 more units this year. The 800 to 1,500 units of housing that will continue to deliver each year over the next 5 years will translate to just over 2,000 additional residents each year. As stated earlier, Capitol Riverfront now has nearly 17,000 residents, more than twice the population of just 5 years ago. Amazingly, that population will likely double again by the end of this decade. In spite of the hits that COVID took on office markets globally, Capitol Riverfront has reason to be optimistic and even to celebrate. The delivery of 2 new buildings bookended 2021. 250M, DDOT's new headquarters, opened in January, and the new Comonix headquarters in the Yards delivered in December. The American Trucking Association announced a substantial new lease in ADM's expansion, which is nearing completion. And Capitol Riverfront's high-quality office product, ideal location, and world-class neighborhood amenities continue to draw strong interest from a wide variety of prospective tenants while retaining existing tenants. Capitol Riverfront continues to emerge as a regional and national destination, as we heard in the interview with Elliott Ferguson earlier, and the growth of our hotel and hospitality sector reflects that. AC Marriott will become our 6th hotel when it opens next month, and Cambria Hotel at Buzzard Point also opened last year, directly adjacent to the bid boundaries. And while the pandemic has been tough on the hotel industry, our hotels have made it through and are looking forward to a better 2022. The bullishness on the neighborhood is why another hotel is planned to break ground this year north of Audi Field. And as Michael and Bonnie and Councilmember Allen and others have alluded to earlier, our retail industry and especially our food and beverage establishments have fared relatively well throughout the pandemic, especially compared to those in other commercial districts around the city and the country. And this owes a lot to the support of the local community. 3 times more openings than closures during COVID is an amazing feat. And while food and beverage led the charge, we also welcomed a new daycare and dental providers to the neighborhood, and Eagle Academy relocated to a permanent location in Watermark's retail space. In the year ahead, we'll bring plenty of more exciting additions with our bid staff focusing on helping our private sector partners to diversify ground floor retail offerings and continuing to collect and share the most accurate and comprehensive information around the neighborhood. And you can see here just a sampling of what we are looking forward to coming to the neighborhood in this upcoming year. Bonnie on our team oversaw our events and communications team, who did a stellar job this year at finding creative and safe ways to build community through a wide range of events. The 80+ in-person events that returned to the bid this year included music, exercise, movies, and the 12 days of Cap Riv and many more, and served as a way for visitors, new residents, and longtime residents to bond over shared experiences. A huge shout out to events manager Grace Osella for making all of this happen. And Bonnie's marketing and comms team, which includes our newest member, Claudia Urbana, also spent the year spreading the word about all things Capitol Riverfront related to keep the community informed about events and news through our social media channels and weekly newsletter, to support local retailers through initiatives like Valentine's Dine and Riverfront Rewards, and to promote the neighborhood to the region as a whole by helping to garner 644 earned media hits. And we've heard a lot about our parks, and it's clear that the parks are one of our neighborhood's most valuable assets, and the community has put them to good use over the past few years. In addition to serving as a location for most of our bid events, the parks are a daily source of recreation and relaxation for the neighborhood and the city as a whole. All of that use has also required a lot of maintenance, which our Director of Parks, Tony Boyd, has done a great job overseeing and was funded by our partners at the DC Department of Recreation. In recognition of the importance of our park, in 2021, the bid board voted to create a capital reserve fund for parks and open space projects, which will help with future upkeep improvements and will also lead to new Friends of Parks groups, which will help serve as community stewards and advocates. And bid staff across all work programs worked to enhance and beautify the public realm this past year, while laying the groundwork for many more improvements to come. The Underpass Master Plan will guide future improvements to the neighborhood's northern gateways. Susan led efforts to improve the new First Street pedestrian zones. The comms team worked with Buzzard Point stakeholders for more new murals in Buzzard Point, and the team continued to work on planning that will lay the groundwork for the future of Buzzard Point's Trails and Parks network. Finally, the planning and development team that I'm part of spent a lot of time this year working to make sure that the transportation and mobility network in the neighborhood will be better able to handle all of this continued growth. Working in partnership with DDOT and transportation consultants at Kimley Horn, we neared completion on the M Street Corridor project that will lead to the redesign of M Street. We partnered with the Southwest Bid to commission a feasibility analysis on north-south mobility to better connect the center of our neighborhoods with Buzzard Point and the north, areas to the north, including the Capitol and Union Station. And we recently launched a task force of property owners along South Capitol Street, which will begin working with the ANCs and other community stakeholders to help guide DDOT in the reimagining of the South Capitol Street corridor as a great urban boulevard. And now I'll turn it back over to Michael Stevens for a future outlook and final thoughts.
Thank you, Ted. I appreciate that great overview you gave of the state of the Capitol Riverfront. And Bonnie, thanks for taking us through the Foundation Awards, 2 important groups being recognized in Gray Star and our residential community. And Susan, thanks for sharing with us the awards for the Clean Team. Well-deserved individuals, but well-deserved for the team as well. And Councilmember Allen, thank you for joining us and providing remarks. You covered a lot of topics, and I appreciate all the things that you said, from redistricting to the importance of the river and the importance of our Clean Team. Thank you so much. So we like to close each annual meeting with a quick look ahead. We've been looking backwards for the past year. I hope you agree with us that it was a successful year. We hit a number of high notes, accomplished a lot, strung together some small successes to lead to a great year. But what's on the horizon for us? We've been in the rearview mirror, so now let's look down the road and see what's coming to us on the highway. Ted and E have done a great job working on transportation connectivity, and that's within the neighborhood as well as going outside the neighborhood to Capitol Hill, the Southwest waterfront, over to Anacostia. I think connectivity is key, the lifeblood of success of our neighborhood. We spoke to the Green Line and its importance, but we also need bus connectivity, bike connectivity, scooter, walkability, and the ability for cars to still access our neighborhood. So that's remains high on our priority list. We're also going to be doing things to support local businesses, as Bonnie and her team and others have done over the past 2 years. And that really goes towards small businesses like Cornucopia and Steadfast Supply, who are part of our inventory of food and beverage, but also retailers. Residential attraction, as Ted talked about, we have a lot of product coming down the pipeline. To have absorbed over 5,000 units over the past 2 years is remarkable. We've delivered more units than any other neighborhood in the city, and that pace is going to continue over through 2022 and 2023. So marketing campaigns to sell the neighborhood and its amenities, its points of differentiation like the river, remain paramount for us. Fostering a sense of community, I think, is a strong draw for people to stay here once they've leased, but to come to our neighborhood after they've seen what's going on in our parks with movies and riverfront concerts and the activity level along the Riverwalk Trail and the river itself. And our fine food and beverage offerings certainly entice that and support that sense of community, as well as being able to volunteer for future Friends of groups, but to be able to support the charities like they did over the past year. And then office market growth. I think we've come to realize, everyone, that a mix of uses is really healthy for any neighborhood. So we're fortunate to have the office that we do now. We'd like to see further capture in the future. Comonix is opening. National Association of Broadcasters joined us. The American Trucking Association is coming. But I know Brookfield is working hard to look at their Yards West campus as a place for IT companies to come to and other users as well. But I think you're going to see over the next few years, as we go through our renewal process, a shift in bid priorities. We've been a lot of things over the past almost 15 years, and part of that was economic development and business attraction and strategic planning and advocacy. But I think we're going to refocus and double down on the quality of the public realm. I think we have to, as we have more residents coming here, more visitors coming here, and hopefully more employment base. We have to have a clean and safe public realm. We have to really maintain at a high level our parks and find additional park space for the future 34,000 people that will live here. Our underpasses will be addressed, and I'll talk about that in a moment. We have 8 underpasses that serve as gateways to Capitol Hill to the north. We want to promote and enhance riverfront accessibility, a centerpiece of our neighborhood in this side of the city. Public art is going to play a bigger role in the public realm. We want to have great streetscapes that are shaded and comfortable and have places to pause and relax and enjoy. More activation in our parks and other found spaces. And then we're really going to work to have Half Street serve as a celebratory space beyond baseball game days. It's going to be loaded with great retail or restaurant opportunities. So we need to embrace it as this great public realm that not only serves as the gateway to the ballpark, but a place for our neighborhood to gather on other special event days. But looking ahead farther down the line, we have some big things coming up for us as well as an organization. First and foremost, our 5-year renewal application. We do this as bids. We're approved by the Executive Office of the Mayor. It's an opportunity for us to look ahead and chart our future from a financial standpoint, from a business plan standpoint, from work programs. And we'll be doing that and submitting in March to the Mayor for our approval, we hope, this summer with public hearings. Tied directly to that is an exercise that we undertook over the summer and the past year called Strategic Initiatives to Achieve Build-Out. And we really worked with our team here at the BID staff, but also with our board members and other stakeholders about what is it going to take to get that next 30% of build-out and build a complete neighborhood. And I think that's an important thing for us to look at, and it's led us to several priority projects we'll be working on, some of which have been discussed. But that laid the foundational groundwork for our 5-year renewal plan. It serves as our strategic plan for that. Ted and E did a magnificent job of focusing on the underpasses, and they've developed an underpass master plan. So we're dealing with 8 public spaces that serve as transition points from Capitol Hill to the north to Capitol Riverfront to the south. And I think you'll see a range of improvements over the next 3 to 5 years, from public art to better lighting to a sequence of art along Virginia Avenue corridor that work in a coordinated fashion. It's a master plan that ties all of those spaces as transition points, but the linear space of Virginia Avenue serving as a framework for all of those underpasses and making them better. Parks funding remains a paramount and very high priority for us as well. And launching the Parks Foundation, as well as the Friends of group, certainly give us a boost or shot in the arm to do that. We've enjoyed working with Councilmember Allen and appreciate all of his support and what the residents did this year to restore our parks funding. We're also working with the BID Council and other BIDs neighborhoods to see if we can go to the council as a united voice to say all of the parks in the center city deserve their fair share of funding, and how can we achieve that? For us, another big move is coming off of the 10th floor here at New Jersey Avenue and moving to ground floor retail space in the Garrett apartment building. Just up the street, 2 blocks. We'll be very close to Canal Park, just as we are now. This gives us an opportunity to interface at the ground level with the neighborhood at large. People can drop by, see the award, the foundation award for the neighborhood itself. We can have smaller gatherings like TED Talks or briefings or ANC meetings. Our conference room will look out over the intersection of H and 2nd Streets. So we think it's going to give us greater visibility and the community a greater opportunity to interact with us. We'll still be with W.C. Smith as our landlord, and we've appreciated a view from the 10th floor for presentations to office tenants and brokers and retail tenants and brokers. But now it's time to go to the ground floor and really interact with the community in a big way. And then we'll be celebrating our 15-year anniversary this year as a BID of operations. And that's quite a milestone for us. We'll be looking at ways to do that through events and things with our board and the community at large, but it's a big number for us, and so we want to recognize that. But the underpinnings over the next 5 years are our 5-year renewal goals. And these are going to be our core principles that we'll embrace as the neighborhood changes. The organization needs to change and pivot to address those needs and opportunities. So facilitating the build out of the neighborhood as a complete neighborhood, maintaining a clean, high quality public realm, fostering an ongoing sense of community through outdoor events in our parks, events that link our neighbors to one another, and other social institutions here like Van Ness Elementary School and the Anacostia Riverkeeper and Earth Conservation Corps. How can they be embedded further into our neighborhood? Implementing a 10-year vision for the parks, which includes that Parks Foundation, but finding additional park space. Enhancing the neighborhood civic infrastructure. Do we need more police or fire stations? Do we need a middle school here? I don't think so. But what are other opportunities to partner with DCPS? Can we have a satellite library? Can we have more daycare facilities? Those sorts of things we need to look at, which are the civic infrastructure that really make a neighborhood fully functional. And we want to enhance accessibility to the CR BID, but also to the Anacostia River. This is our biggest point of differentiation. So we need to allow people the opportunity to go and enjoy it on the Riverwalk Trail through canoeing and kayaking and bicycling and walking and running, and ultimately one day swimming in the river, but other boating opportunities as well. And then I think the last thing is attracting retail, office, and residents and diversifying that ground floor retail space, as Ted spoke about. But these will be the foundational aspects of our BID renewal. It's going to involve the community. It's going to involve our stakeholders. It's going to involve nonprofit organizations that serve the community. It's going to involve the ANC, all sorts of types as we try to move forward for the next 5 years. And we typically try and keep our meetings to just an hour and a half. So we would like to say that this will close out the program for today. We appreciate you joining us today. We want to take the opportunity. I want to take the opportunity to thank our board of directors, as Scott did, and I appreciate Scott taking the helm for the next 2 years. And I want to thank Adam directly for being the board chair for the past 2 years. It was very important to work with him. It was a great year, and I think the board did wonderful things for us through not only the board membership, but also the executive committee, who really we work with on a very much a monthly basis. Secondly, I want to thank our professional team here at the BID. They're an amazing team. They have a variety of skill sets. We're a small team, but we are mighty, and they accomplished great things over the past year, and I'm looking forward to working with them over the next year to do even more. And lastly, I'd like to thank the clean team. I just think these men and women are out 365 days a year. They do unbelievable work in the snow, in the rain, in the heat. They help maintain the parks. They help maintain the public realm. They do a lot of things that you don't notice until they're not being taken care of. But I think most of the time you notice that they are being taken care of and that we have a really high quality public realm. So we look forward to partnering with all of you over the next 5 years. It's been an incredible run for the past 14, almost 15 years, and we have much more to be done. So stay tuned. We'll be back again next year in person, we hope. And I want to thank you as an audience for joining us today for our Capitol Riverfront BIDS annual meeting and State of the Capitol Riverfront. Please go to the website and look at the annual report. Ted and E did a great job. But thank you again for participating. We'll see you throughout the year. And again, we'll convene again in January. Thanks, everyone.